All right, well, we like to start on time and it's 4:41. So let's get started, and I know people will join us as we go along. Oh, but before that, let me remember how to mute. Okay, so now we won't get that doorbell when people come on. My name is Joy Rosenthal. I'm the president of One Breath Rising. Abby London Crawford and EJ Antonio are also on the board and are with us. We're very excited to be doing this in general, but particularly tonight to present Willie Perdomo, and EJ will introduce him in a second. A few suggestions. One is that, especially when he starts, that you put your view on speaker view so you can see him. We ask that people mute themselves, which I know is a little weird for the performer because they don't get to hear us clap, but you can show your appreciation by either visually or by making reactions in the chat. And we often have an active chat. You're more than welcome to write things down that hit you especially, or that are active or whatever. We're very grateful that you're here. I'm going to put in a link to how you can make a donation because we asked for a $10 donation. And tell your friends, tell your enemies, tell everybody that you can think of to join us. We do this on the second Sunday of each month, except I think for Mother's Day. And I guess that's it for me. EJ, why don't you take it away?
Hello, everybody, and good afternoon. I'm here to introduce our feature for today. We are thrilled to present the award-winning poet and educator, Willie Perdomo. I will read you his bio, and I'm going to read one of his poems before he starts. Willie Perdomo is the author of Smoking Lovely, the remix, The Crazy Bunch, the essential hits of Shorty Bon Bon, and Where a Nickel Costs a Dime. He is the winner of the Foundation for Contemporary Arts Twombly Award for Poetry, the New York City Book Award in Poetry, and the Penn Open Book Award. Willie was also a finalist for the National Book Critics Circle Award and the Poetry Society of America's Norma Farber First Book Award. He is co-editor of the anthology Latínext, and his work has appeared in the New York Times Magazine, Poetry, Washington Post, The Best American Poetry 2019, and African Voices. He is currently a Lucas Arts Literary Fellow and a core faculty member at VONA Voices of Our Nation's Writing Workshop. And he currently teaches at Phillips Exeter Academy and was recently appointed the New York State Poet Laureate. Now I'm going to read this poem that we put on our flyer because it so reminds me of things that my uncles used to say when I was growing up. And the name of the poem is That's My Heart Right There. We used to say, that's my heart right there, as if to say, don't mess with her right there, as if don't even play, that's a part of me right there. In other words, okay, that's the start of me right there, as if come that day, that's the end of me right there, as if push comes to shove, I would fend for her right there, as if come what may, I would lie for her right there, as if come love to pay, I would die for that right there. Ladies and gentlemen, Willie Perdomo.
Hello, mic check. Can you hear me, EJ?
Yes, I can hear you.
Right on, good. Oh, you know, I haven't heard anyone read that poem I've been reading the poem, but I haven't heard anyone else read the poem. You did a great job on that. But now I'll have one less poem to read tonight. But you really did a great job tonight, and I'm glad it reminded you of your uncles and the love in the household and the family and in our lives generally, and the different ways we have of saying that we love each other. So I appreciate that. Thank you also to the One Breath Rising organization for the invitation. I know EJ and I, we were kind of trying to coordinate some dates along the way, and we finally made it happen. Of course, we always want to do these things in person. It's been weird to, or at least strange to do the readings on Zoom. I think the best thing about doing the readings on Zoom is that you can do them in your slippers now, right? So you can just kind of come to the mic and have your slippers on. But so I really appreciate the invitation. It's Sunday, some snow flurries outside, so it's a great day to read some poems. As we know, it's Valentine's Day tomorrow, so I think I'm just gonna follow EJ's lead there and sort of look at some of the love poems or so-called love poems that I have in my most recent collections, and I think it's important to read poems that kind of address or attempt to address matters of the heart, because there is a level of trauma, there is a level of tragedy that happens, especially in the Crazy Bunch. But I do need to recognize that alongside the tragedy, alongside some of the trauma and the violence, there was a lot of joy, there was a lot of love in the weekend that I attempt to chronicle in the lives of these 5 young men. So I'll read from that in a minute. As is my tradition, and poets that I know, I want to give a special shout out to Cheryl Boyce Taylor, who I think is in the house, and Brother Ngoma for sure, who I have not seen in ages. So, but I'm glad he's here. So much respect. But as is tradition, we usually read a poem by another poet before we start, as EJ did at the beginning. So I've been teaching my thing as Father's Floaters in my senior elective here at Exeter. And there's one poem that I want to read called Love is a Luminous Insect at the Window. And it's a sonnet that he writes for Lauren Maria Spala, June 13, 2019. The word love, there it is again, indestructible as an insect, fly faster than the swatter, mosquito darting through the net. How the word love chirps in every song, crickets keeping a city boy up all night. I wish I could fry and eat them. How the word love buzzes in sonnet after sonnet. I am the beekeeper who wakes from a nightmare of beehives. To quote Duran, the Panamanian brawler who waved the glove and walked away in the middle of a fight. No mas, no more. Then I see you watching the violinist, his eyes shut, the Russian composer's concerto in his head, white horsehair fraying on the bow, and your face is bright with tears. And there it is again, the word love. Not a fly or a mosquito, not a cricket or a bee, but the lunar moth we saw one night, luminous green wings knocking at the screen on the window as if to say, I have a week to live, let me in, and I do. So I'm gonna work my way from sort of early to most recent. And this is a poem called Word to Everything I Love, which is again another way that we had of saying you need to believe me when I tell you what I'm telling you. This is my word to everything that I love. I feel like dropping some bombs tonight. I have a milk crate bursting at the handles with muses that look like 3x7 memo pads, but I only need a minute of your time. If I told you that your woman was playing you dirty and you asked if I was for real, I would say word, that's my word to everything I love. only because that's what Brother Lowe says when he wants you to believe him more than you believe in the God of your choice. These poets who don't even know it will not put their palms on a stack of Bibles or swear on the soul of an unborn child. If you find out that they're lying, you can have everything they love. Here's bomb number one. I want to give a shout out to all those lyric poets who cried behind the whole low score and left the short circuit through the back door. This is my word to everything I love. When you come back home, you might expect welcome mats of damn, where you been? You look good. Is there anything I can do for you? Anything you need? These are the same mats you stepped on before. When you come back home, you might expect the spotlight to be as bright as the last time you left the stage, but the page got turned out and you got erased from the next chapter. When you come back home, your beloveds will ask you if you're working your steps, and you'll say that you closed your eyes, took one giant step, and never looked back. Word to everything I love. After you make the love you dream of making, you come home to clean your closets. You keep the phone nearby just in case you bump into half of something that will bring you back and hit you where it hurts. This blockbuster I give to the word hitters who love to shadow backstage. Let me make a short story shorter. Let me tell you about the night I walked Magna to the supermarket. It snowed so much you could have saved this story in a snow globe. The whole Goya bean section knew that we were in love. I carried her ginger, garlic, and twist off mop in one hand and orange juice and scented candles in another. She gave me her tongue in the vestibule and told me a secret. The next morning, we met in a garden filled with computers. We downloaded all kinds of flowers and trees. Word to everything I love. Like that, Magda rollerbladed to the clinic with good news. Don't you understand? This is for you repeat offenders in the final round. For those of you who need new material, this is the song of the almost and the was. Sounds like tears dropping into a voicemail. She would have wanted to wear ponytails to class picture day. She would have sketched a poem and left it on my pillow. She was surrounded by a circle of street pigeons in a city square. Today, I missed a train stop thinking of what her name would have been. So I mentioned this book called The Crazy Bunch, and again, this is the name of a crew in this book, and it chronicles the lives of a weekend in the lives of 5 young Black and Puerto Rican men, respectively, at the dawn of the hip hop era. In this particular section, they have just come back from a triple feature in Times Square, and they are going to a Sweet 16 in the Bronx for a young woman named Josephine. There's a kid named here. His name is Skinnicky, who's alternatively called Papo, and he's basically they're all teenagers for the most part, and he's in love with Josephine, but he hasn't said it yet. So this is when they get to the party. Josephine's Sweet 16. By the time we got to Josephine's Sweet 16, there were cheese doodle fingers everywhere. Fat Phil was already deep into his fake pachanga step. Skaniki, Angel, and Dre set up a snapshot by the cake tiers. Josephine's eyes were lit like strobes and glitter. Her silver dress hardly fit her, and because Angel was still tripping, he saw sequin in everything. Quinine in the ice cream, a fork and spoon standoff. He even saw his fate in a rack of plastic champagne glasses, bubbles big as balloons released into the sky all at once. Come on, bro, you can't mess with a man who's wearing a tuxedo, he said. Cubes of cheddar and guayaba sat like Zen masters on the spheres of Ritz crackers. Josephine's brother kept adjusting his top hat because he had to give away his sister, told us to stay by the round table just in case she tried to roll out and get reborn all of a sudden. Josephine graced her gold-plated throne. Her reinvention was imminent. Put on your cake face, Angel said. What we thought we heard Skaniki say was, if Sekhmet created the desert with a breath, then Shorty Bong Bong split the Atlantic to death. Party over here, party over there, and this right you get to take with you. The grown-ups spent most of their free time in the bathroom, and whenever the DJ played a gran combo, we all sighed and dipped to the staircase to make out, roll up, or add up. Little Joe, Josephine's uncle, tried to call us out on our stagnancy. Non-disciplined knuckleheads, he'd say, and as a way of offering evidence, he'd point to Fat Phil, and there was Fat Phil crashing into the VIP table, almost made Josephine's abuelita spill her rum until abuelita threw him a life-saving turn and spun Fat Phil back into his seat. There's that moment right when the flashbulb flashed on Josephine's smile, where your sense of lottery and random tries to reason with you. And yet there's just enough chance to survive more than one fresh hell and emerge without taking shorts. This piece is called Sucker for Love Ass 1. Skaniki, Jim Browski ass, that sucker for love ass, the love that gives you a pound, the love that blooms and blushes, the love that sees you around, the love that scars and shushes, the love that cries the wrong name, the love that pulls the right trigger, the love that stays true to the game, the love that says, forget you, the love you work hard to forget, the love that likes to point fingers, the love that curses and sweats, the love that plays backup singer, the love that truths when it writes, the love that days when it nights. 2. Skaniki, Jim Browski ass, that sucker for love ass. He liked to be sad for fun. Every New Year's Eve, he'd walk up and down 125th Street looking for Josephine. He would put his ear to the curb to listen for her footsteps. He even walked into the 25th precinct to see if any desk appearance tickets had been issued in her name. He joined freestyle ciphers with everything he would have said given another chance. Brother Lowe once said, heartbreaks need corroborations, so you have to commit everything to memory, no paper. Who had software to guarantee that none of us would crash? 3, the rules of engagement. Whenever you walk with your boo, make sure she's always on your left side, inside the curve. Tell her how you feel, but never the last word. Platinum, gold, they're just metals. Let her pedal the 10 speed sometimes. She'll tell you when she wants you to know. There was nothing that included the word settle in Josephine's style. None of us had girls, so how to say, that's my woman. That night, Skaniki had the nerve to pull out his Black composition book. In all of her waking language, Josephine needed to be free. She put her hands up like a crossing guard. Wait up, she said. There you go, already putting shit in the game. The windows were marauded by twilight, and it was a beautiful summer to be a sucker for love ass. All you had to do was surrender. Skaniki tried to hit her with some Shalimar. It's got to be real. Girl, I could write a book on how you're making me feel. Then Josephine turned her neck and rolled her eyes. Say it right, she said. Let it all be automatic true. Don't be shook. Don't book. Be good in this dream. According to you, she said. I never used the right words. Can you read me now? Don't name what it's not, but don't stand there and try to sky me. Ain't that much poetry in the world, she said. 4. You could say that Josephine lived in the virtuous time. She had a habit of cutting you short when you came up to her and said, I'm going to tell you something, but you have to promise not to tell anyone. She bulleted the abuses, the excuses, the short fuses, and then she hit Skinnicky with her dream. She saw 0, so liberation was on the menu. Mr. Softy Vanilla so sweet it was forbidden. A baguette meant bouncy so we can all eat. A beige pair of heels told her to stay neutral. There was a 7, so her mental was on point. A glass of water rushed to leave its solutions. Don't even try to open any thank you notes here, she said. Before the lonely pays a social call, stay faithful to the bad and wrong. Don't worry about my heart. It'll remember what it's supposed to remember. Don't forget the first rule, baby. Write about what you know. Her last word was siempre. And then she went silent like a blank piece of paper. 2 couplets later, Skinnicky was back on the block, heading straight toward the age of forgetting. And it was true then, as it is now, that there were only a few of us holding the street down with our hearts. There's an outfit in the Crazy Bunch called the Poetry Cops, and it stands for Consolidated Poetry Systems. And throughout the book, they've been interviewing this kid named Papo about this weekend. But then they shift and they start to interview Josephine and some of the other people who were in the neighborhood around that time. And in this particular interview, they talk with Josephine. The Poetry Cops talk with Josephine. And it's cops, Josephine, you should know, which one is who, hopefully, right? Cops. Skinnicky told us you were his heart. Papa was lying. We spoke to a few people from Lexington that swear by it. In the morning, you just want all the bad shit to be gone. He said you were his beautiful battle. Yeah, he liked that word a lot. Beautiful. He called you a real dream. Dreams are the only time you can wake up before someone pulls the trigger. We just want to hear your side, Josephine. When Slick shows up, it makes my hands sweat, and I don't do old love. But what if it was true? You can freestyle the truth, and I told them, once you start using the word soul, you start wanting things you can't have. But what if, though? I dig it. Sometimes you have to fantasize to your favorite ifs. What do you keep to yourself just in case you have to run away? We just want to help Skinnicky, that's all. He's just trying to remember. I used to ask him, what's going to happen when the words stop working? He was always trying to spit all that Gucci love, and I don't speak Spanish. Okay, then, can we talk about beauty hunger? Not for nothing, honestly and truthfully, when it came to beauty, some of us had empty stomachs. My Uncle Joe always told me, you have to watch them when they lean to talk. Watch to see if they wipe crumbs off your lip. I'm not a poet, mister, but I can see. And what was it you saw that night? Love is where the paper unfolds unto itself. When I'm lying, my tongue seeks shelter. The horoscopes get it all wrong. And I don't believe in emergency numbers. You might as well hang me on the wall and look at me all day. I pick up speed when I turn the corner. I'll read one more. I'll read one more from Smoking Lovely, and then I think we're gonna open up for some Q&A, I think, at some point, right? This is a love poem that happens in Smoking Lovely. And the book was remixed only because it was a book that really came out about 2004. And then I reissued it with Haymarket Books with a really great introduction by Udayon Noel. I wrote a short play, a 10-minute play that's in it, and then an afterword that I wrote about how many misgivings I had actually with the book, and I wanted the book to sort of disappear. But sometimes, you know, you do want to write a poem, or at least a line in a poem that you'd be hard pressed to sort of erase. So you have to place it somewhere where you have to reach high to erase it. So this is called Notes for a Slow Jam, and a slow jam would be an R&B song, say like a Luther Vandross song, something like that. It'd be a love song. The notes. You want to play this like Petrarch and bless her with a suite of sonnets, but you don't mess with sonnets. So you decide to write 100 letters for 100 days, but you're getting discharged tomorrow morning. So you write a slow jam on the back of this patient bill of rights. Yesterday, your roommate asked if you had a love in the world. You told them about the night you watched Laura Network of Velvet Lounge as Wynton Marsalis played a blues tribute for Albert Murray. During a solo, you heard yourself blow a quick, "Oh, wow, who is that riff?" But the little voice convinced you that a woman whose laugh could play with music was too good for you. Your roommate says, "Damn, that's messed up," and went to the day room before you could tell him that the first time she said yes, you stayed in bed with her for 3 days, had breakfast specials delivered, and listened to Robin Harris snap on Baby's Kids. You had her laugh all to yourself. Right now, you're looking out the window, feeling the poem she always wanted about to drop like heavy rain slapping the swing seats in Morris Park. Time to play diamonds before they call a melancholy snack time. Stray dogs bark at soundproof windows. The bass line sinks, and all you want to know is where is your funny Valentine? The slow jam. This is the poem you always wanted. I've turned into a fire-can crooner to sing you this slow jam, a farewell greeting. No sooner than the sun set on our meeting, I had a song for you. But first, I had to sample from the midnight quiet storm, like break up to make up and make up to break up and break up to wake up. I was a 3-time loser, fell in heart over head, not even a chance to carve the initials of our romance on the bark of a tree. There's nothing, no one left to point at and say, it's all because of you. So I have an encounter session with the bathroom mirror. Those black crescents under my eyes tried to cover the cries that fell on the street as I peeked on a broken heart bench, had to get high. So I play Angel Social Club, where I find the answer boiling in a jukebox. Pick a song, hip hopping through life. I thought salsa was just for the rice and beans. I was wrong. You probably think I'm high right now if I told you that Tito Rojas was a Greek playwright, or that Euripides had his own conjunto. Listen to the tragic hero chilling on the corner. Epic spilling from his mouth. A chorus throws gifts off a rooftop. Ay, ay, ay. Y dice que los hombres nunca, nunca deben llorar. I look into the mirror one more time before I chase you away. And just in case you don't speak Spanish, here's some muddy waters. Like, you can't spend what you ain't got, and you can't lose what you never had. My pockets are empty, and I'm letting you go without a fight. But before you go, here's the poem you always wanted. Thank you.
Great. There we go. Wow. That was really good, Willie. It was taking me back. I was like, okay. I just want to make a statement about the poems you read today. I really love how you capture the spontaneity and the rhythm of the languages from Harlem, Harlem and the Bronx. Because I grew up in Harlem and the Bronx. So it's like, oh, so it's like taking me back. Like it was almost like a movie.
Yeah.
You know, the soundtrack for the movie.
That's right. I had a whole soundtrack in my head while I was writing it for sure. And, you know, I can, no matter how far I get from New York is always there sort of with me, especially those parts of New York that you mentioned, Harlem and the Bronx and whatnot. So that's always there with me. And, you know, the vernacular is part of, it's as much vernacular language as it is ritual and tradition and all of it. So yeah, I'm glad I took you back.
Yeah, it is ritual, definitely ritual.
Yeah, indeed.
When you said, I don't do emergency numbers, I was like, and the one line that you read that really, like, it resonated with me because, you know, as much joy and everything that goes on in Harlem, that went on and still goes on in Harlem and the Bronx, you know, from back when I was and today, was this concept of, when it came to beauty, some of us had empty stomachs.
Mm.
It was like, oh, yeah, that is true. Even within whatever the joy was that was going on, there was still this little kernel of empty.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah,
it was great.
Yeah, when you connect that to sort of the concept of what it means to have a hunger for beauty, right? Then you're right. That's right. There is that little sort of emptiness that sort of stays there. How the lengths that we go to sort of fill that emptiness as well, right? So that's part of it.
Right. Wow. Speaking of, you said you had the soundtrack in your head. So for me, poetry is really sound. How those words come out on the page, how they sound when you read them, when they're put out there. So I'm going to ask you, if you were going to put the poems to music and you had the option of putting together a trio of instruments, what trio would you have?
Oh, that's a great question. I thought you were going to say what actually artists or what song, but that you took it a step further.
Musicians.
Yeah, you took it a step further.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I would think it would have to be piano.
Okay.
Bass. I want to say drums, but I'm gonna have to go with an assortment of percussion. It has to be the like conga drums and all that. That would have to be part of it, but not just a set of drums, but like congas, set of drums. So whoever was going to play would have to be versatile.
Okay. When I heard it, I heard sax, drum, and bass.
Yeah. Wait, what was the first one?
Sax.
Sax.
Yeah. There is part of that too. There's that melancholy sound, that Dexter Gordon sound that I'm thinking about when I'm thinking about, you know, the sax for sure.
Yeah, that comes through. I hear it when I hear it when I heard it when you were reading. I was like, oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So, just so everybody knows, this is open. Anybody want to ask Willie a question while I'm, you want to just come on in. We're not overly formal here. You don't have to raise your hand and all that kind of stuff. Okay.
EJ, I love that you brought in sax, and I thought of JD and all the wind he plays and the percussion. I must tell you, Willie, this is the best Super Bowl pre-show I have attended.
Thank you.
Yes. I wrote down lines. I don't usually write down lines. Write about what you know without punctuation. In the morning, you want the bad shit to be gone.
Yeah.
Beautiful and empty stomachs. Oh, Willie Perdomo, thank you.
Thank you.
Way to have a Sunday afternoon.
Thank you.
I
So
have a
Willie,
question.
oh, go
I
ahead,
have a
Cheryl.
question. I have a question. Hey, Willie.
Hey.
So what I was wondering, I found myself cursing in my writing during this pandemic more than ever. And so I was wondering if you feel your work has changed in any way. Is it more compassionate? Is it angrier? What type of emotions do you find going into it, if it has affected you in any way?
Yeah, I think tranquility is probably the biggest emotion right now, right? The
Which one?
idea of tranquility, right? The
Oh,
being
okay.
calm. I think now being in the space where, I was able to look at some of those. There was a handful of traumatic images I remember from being as a teenager, right? So I had to be in a certain space to remember those and write about them and try to do honor for them. I think along with the sadness that comes with writing about it and some of the anger over the loss of some really good friends that I had as a kid and how none of us really were supposed to be subjected to something like that. I don't think, right? As young people, I had enough capacity, I think, in my heart to let in the laughter. I had enough space in my heart to let in the love. I had enough expansion, I think, to let in joy. There's this poem called Breaking Night. I remember when I was writing it, I was in California, but I was breaking night in California working on this book. I was trying to meet the deadline. I remember at the one point, they have already lost a couple of friends and they pick each other up and they had went to a party and then they pick up some of the other crew members up and they all go swimming. They jump over a gate in a public school, in a public swimming pool. And they jump over a gate and they strip down to their boxes and they do relays. And I just remember kind of being in that space. And I remember that morning that we did that and how much fun we had, how much it was, you don't want to be nostalgic about it, but you do want to recall those moments where you felt like this is forever, like you felt like this is going to be forever. And it's not eventually, but because we are poets, we're sort of invested in preserving that memory. I think now, yeah, there is a little bit more compassion, right? There is a little bit more of
Kindness. Oh, yeah.
yeah, there is a kindness of the soul there. There is in my first book, I remember I taught my very, very first workshop and there was someone who asked me if I wrote love poems. And I remember saying in the poem, I used to write about scabs that chip off stone faces and fall on bleeding streets. And I thought that all the poems I wrote were love poems. So in other words, that even if I was writing about the tragedy, even if I was trying to address the trauma, that I was doing it with love, right?
Yes.
And then I had to start thinking about what it means. What is the act of love? It's more of a practice than anything else, right? Action sometimes falls short as well as far as their connection to words. But once you keep practicing that part of love, what does that mean? So I'm working on something now that sort of addresses that on a larger scope, and I think more voices are at play right now, and it's weird you mentioned the thing about the cursing because there was a few words here and there that I had to sort of bloop out, right? It just felt like I had to in this particular instance, but I think if I was, it depends on where you're reading sometimes,
Yes.
and I might have gone back, but again, Cheryl, is the kind of thing where if I'm writing a book to one person, and this is one person who's asking me to remember, I'm not really thinking about the larger reader out there with a capital R. Like as a reader, you're just going to have to get in where you can and hang on while you're there,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
But because I'm actually writing to one person, that makes a difference in terms of how I use my language. So, but it's something that I've been thinking about this question. How are we growing as writers, for sure.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Mm.
It's a very helpful answer. Because I have a lot of cussing and I'm like, I don't think I can put this much fuck in a book.
Right. And you know, that's the one word I don't use, right? And I mean, I work maybe once or twice, but shit is one of my favorite words. You know what I mean?
Thank
You know,
you.
shit
Thank
is
you.
one of my favorite words. So, and how to use it is something as well. But yeah, it's something to think about.
Thank you.
Yeah, for sure.
I have a question that you kind of just alluded to, but you're writing a lot about a lot of painful stuff, and I'm wondering how you handle that when you're writing. Like, do you have to be in a really safe space when you're writing it, or what do you do to take care of yourself while you're dealing with that?
Yeah, I mean, that's part of it, right? I think there was a quote that I bumped into, and one of the older romantic poets, I think it was Wordsworth, I'm not sure, but that idea that you have to be the space of tranquility that you need to recall an emotion. So that means that once you find yourself in a sort of less than chaotic spot, less than a noisy spot, that you are able to look back and you can recall clearly what happened. And I think, you know, there was enough time for me to pass that made me comfortable with addressing my memory and what it was presenting to me. The other part is that I know that I was trying to honor some lives that were lost. And again, the book takes place over a weekend, but really it's an assortment, it's a collection of weekends over the course of many summers condensed into this one particular book. So, but the idea of being in a safe space, you know, this is an interesting question because I've never known books to be a safe space that really, so I wasn't thinking necessarily that I'm creating a safe space here, but I was thinking that I am surrounded by a group of people that I love. And right now, my role in this circle is to tell the story of what happened, the imagined story, the story based on a set of images that really were resonant throughout my adulthood, that would come back at the most sort of random moments, but they would always come back. The other part was that, you know, I wanted to write a sort of love letter to one of my favorite movies of all time, a movie called Cooley High that takes place in Chicago in 1964, that follows a group of young Black teenagers over the course of a weekend. And I wanted to sort of write, I think there was mention of how it felt. I think EJ might have mentioned the idea of how it felt cinematic, that there was a movie, which indeed was part of the intention, that I really wanted to create a movie of that time through the poetry. So I think the safest space that I was able to create, to construct the book, to imagine the book, and finally to edit and revise it, was definitely a psychic space of being calm, being removed, not far removed, but removed enough to sort of look at the image and look at it closely. And then there was the physical space. So I finished most of the book in California during my Lucas Arts residency, where they provide you studio space. And anyone who's, you know, in the audience right now understands the value of having a dedicated space to work, because you can really stretch out your imagination as you do so, and you have the physical space to sort of read out loud, yell if need be, listen to music, dance while you're writing the book. This is something I discovered, that if I'm dancing while I'm writing my book, I know that I'm in good shape. I know that I'm in a good space because I'm hanging out with my book. I'm living with it. I'm inside of it. It's not me being the writer and then the book is on a pedestal and I'm sort of worried that it might break if I do something wrong. There was none of that, I think, in the creation of the book. And to be honest, I think being in that space liberated me from so many censors that I might have had looking over my shoulder when you sit at the desk and try to write a poem where you think, I'm not sure I might be able to write that for the following reasons. Those things were pretty much gone, and I felt free. I felt really, really free as I was working on the book. So I would say that the most significant space was a space of freedom.
At what age did you just, this is a general question, that sense of freedom that you just described, at what age did you get that sense of freedom? At what age did you allow yourself to have that sense of freedom? Could you have written that book when you first started writing poetry?
Oh, great question.
I thought I had that freedom when I first wrote, you know, with Where a Nickel Costs a Dime. It's interesting. I'm gonna do a reading and conversation with a poet named I think her name is Tamara J. Madison. She has this breakthrough series, I think it's called, and she wants to focus specifically on Where a Nickel Costs a Dime. So that's going to be interesting to sort of talk about something that's 25 years old, right? And think about the space that you were in when you were. I felt really, really free, even though I knew that poets like Langston Hughes and the Harlem Renaissance poets and Black Arts Movement and Billy Tomas and Sonia Sanchez, all these poets were kind of looking over my shoulder as I'm writing this book, because this is what I'm reading at the time. But I still didn't come to a full practice, EJ, I would say, until I went back to school. I was about 40. So I was already, by that point, 2 books in. And I was one of those second career students, because I had left college when I first went, because my dream to be a poet in the world was large. It was like really, really big. And a campus could not contain it at that moment. So, I went back to New York, and I got into the New Rican Poets Cafe, and I met Marie Brown, and I started sort of my apprenticeship as a poet in the world. Got banged up a little bit along the way without question, and then started sort of living my adult life, went back to school, and then the passion became the journey from passion to sort of theory to practice. I could see it at this point. So I would say that the freedom really came with the Crazy Bunch, EJ. I think the freedom really was there, where I just felt like, all right, man, I already know, given my language use here, and not just, there is a level of profanity there, but I'm just talking about like the idea of taking a lyric and doing some different things with it. The level of rhyme, the sonic charge that my books have, right? The idea that someone mentioned about the sound of the book. You record Mary Baraka's essay from the 50s, How You Sound. This is a really influential essay, and it's a really short essay about the freedom of one poet's sound and how you sort of need to erase all types of complexes that you might have about sounding like other poets. And that's extremely liberating when you think about facing the page. So I found it, I think I've always had it, but I truly found it when I was working on the Crazy Bunch. And I knew that the language was such that it's a hard book to enter, because it's such an inside book for sure, but it's a book about writing as it is about a weekend in the lives of these young men. It's also a book about poetry if you read it. It's hard to read selections of the last 2 books, for sure, the essential hits of Shorty Bonbon and the Crazy Bunch, without you having read the entire book. So I got to a point where I stopped writing poems as much as I started writing books of poems. I started writing books. That's where I really was at. I wasn't interested necessarily in writing one-off poems. I was thinking books.
How do you impart that knowledge to your students?
Well, the audience, that's the first thing I tell my students. Who is it you're writing to? I mean, I know I'm a teacher, right? So I know that I'm going to read the papers, and unfortunately, they need to be assessed, and unfortunately, they need to be graded. But who is it that you actually really are writing to? Because if you think about it carefully, it'll direct how you choose to write. It'll direct the voice you choose to write with, and it'll direct what you choose to write about. So First is audience. There is a level of voice that I like to encourage my students to use, depending on where they're from. There are different types of regionalisms, if they have any. The use of current day slang, how to use that, right? I believe highly in the use of vernacular to enrich any kind of text. I think even we both know that when Langston Hughes started writing those blues poems, all the folks were like, "Oh boy, you can't really write about that. You can't write about that in the language that you're writing about because it's almost blasphemous if you do so, right?" So you have to take that risk, I think. So I like to encourage my students to do that, to take that risk, and it's off, because I teach, teenagers, so they were like, "Can we really write like that?" I'm like, "Yeah, you can actually write like that," and try to encourage that kind of freedom and flexibility. And then you start talking about structure, and then you start talking about the role of imagery and scene if you're writing a personal narrative, and you never stray away from those fundamentals. If you zoom in on the image close enough, it'll speak for the larger picture. Trust me on this one, right? So I kind of impart that kind of feedback to my students. Yeah.
Okay. The one question I have to ask you before we wrap up is, so everybody should know, I asked Willie to feature for One Breath Rising, and I think about a month or so later, there was the announcement that he had been named the Poet Laureate of New York State. So Willie, what does it mean to you to be named the Poet Laureate of New York State? How does that feel?
Man, I think that's one of the coolest things. I think in my whole poetry life is one of the coolest things ever. I think I had a conversation with the Center for Puerto Rican Studies out of the CUNY system, and I was talking to Urayoan Noel, who's a scholar and teacher Spanish and a poet as well. And the question came up, and immediately what I started thinking about was my poet trajectory, right? The journey of someone who's even thinking about writing a poem or telling a story. The poet is a young artist, a young boy looking outside the window and being mesmerized by imagery and the sounds that are coming through the window. The poet who's then sitting on the stoop and listening to gossip and tall tales and legends and so on. The poet who definitely makes his way down to the street corner, and now you start to see that how a story actually comes out of a body, how music comes out of your body, and how one expresses that. The poet who then takes the train down to school and trying to navigate different worlds in the course of a single day and what that means. I learned my best lesson as a poet outside of a book. I learned it on the number 5 train going uptown. My mentor, Ed Randolph, we were riding together on the train, and I think he was going to the Bronx, and I would get off on 125th Street, and he taught me that a poet essentially needs concentration, and that when the train pulls into the station, he says you're going to feel it under your feet. You're going to feel like a little yank, a little tug, and it's going to pull itself in the station. And I remember it was rush hour, EJ, and I just blocked everything out, and I had my eyes closed, and I just concentrated, and I just felt it. I felt the snag, right? So as a poet in the world, you need to think about the ground under your feet. So when I think about that lesson, I think about first coming to the New Rican Poets Cafe. I think about approaching Ed. And again, all these little moments in time that make up a poet's life. And then suddenly, the members of the community I lived in East Harlem, the people who lived there, how happy they were and how they actually celebrated my poet life way before I was the state poet of New York. When I first published my Where a Nickel Costs a Dime, how some of my homies would take the book and show it off to people and say, "This is my friend right here." You're the poet in the crew, and now you're the poet of the state, right? And so it's kind of enlarged and expanded that way. It's like circles just kind of keep going out, but all those circles make up some sort of weird Venn diagram. Everything seems to be connected that leads up to this one space. And not to mention that, if you look at the list of state poet laureates of New York, of the state, I'm in good company. Audre Lorde is up in there, and I think Comanyaca is up in there. And I think I'm the first Puerto Rican, if not first Latínext, poet in the country who was the poet of the state poet of New York, and that's immensely gratifying. When I finally got the citation, that last line said, "We hereby appoint you state poet of New York 2021, 2023." I was like, "Oh shit, I can't believe this. This is it's official, right? There's a citation there." So I think it's definitely one of the highlights of my poet life in this country.
Great, great. Are there any other questions out there? Anybody else want to make comments?
Well, I want to make a comment. Willie, you bet I'm going to mention you in my speech on Wednesday.
Absolutely. Congratulations to you as well.
Oh, I am and Jackie, who threw me out of the nest from the Frederick Douglass Creative Arts Center. You're already in my speech.
Yes.
You never stop saying that. You never stop saying that.
Thank you.
I won't. Okay, I shouldn't say that.
No, it's wonderful. She threw you out and look where you are now.
I had to put her out.
Those who know me well know that my mouth is my fortune and my miss.
There you go.
There you go. So, Abby,
so proud of you, Willie.
Thank you.
I just want to say I'm so proud of you, from the New Rican to the New York State poet.
Thank you.
Abby, you wanted to say something? You're on mute, Abby.
Wonderful.
Abby.
There she goes.
As a listener to your poetry, I'm hearing it on so many different levels at once, which is, to me, the artistry of language and the way you can put those words together, and emotionally I'm here and there, and I'm my experiences relating to your experiences. It's all coming in together at once. I mean, it's brilliant. That's what I love about hearing a great poet like yourself. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And, I appreciate that, because, what we're doing is not trying to play with just a single note. There's a lot of notes there that we have at our disposal. And clearly, it seems like you heard a few of them along the way that kind of resonated with your own heart and soul. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah. You're very welcome. Thank you.
I think one of the important things for a poet to learn about themselves is to find their sound.
Yes.
Their rhythm, their own internal rhythms and sounds, and to bring that out onto the page.
I firmly believe
it's not an easy thing to do, and you really have to focus and concentrate and learn as you during your writing, the progression of your writing, to know when you are authentically being yourself, rhythm and music wise on the page.
Yeah, I'm 100% agree with you, EJ, that the sound for me as a poet specifically is everything.
Yeah, I find it, I personally find it difficult to divorce the two, although I know some people do. I don't know how they do that.
Right. I can't. It's never been in my tradition, so to do that. So
mine either.
The sound has always been, up there just as much as it has to do with the image, the form, all of it. But the sound,
all of it.
That how you sound piece is, I think, vital for the way I approach my lines. There's no question.
Right. So, any other questions? Yes. Take yourself off mute. Speak right up.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Willie. I'm just really glad that abuelita and that quinceañero was holding some rum in that glass.
Indeed.
That's the beauty of all this work, that it's so, I think there's the phrase, keeping it real. You know, it's like you didn't write about Abuelita that was whatever. She was real. She was holding, you know, a glass of rum and was sensitive enough to catch the guy and spin him around or whatever.
You caught that good.
Yes, it is not just that. It happens often in your work, and that's one of the brilliance that I would never want to box you into he's the historian, the documentarian, but you're not. It's not only the sounds that I could hear all the loud music going on in that quinceañera party, and the, you know, all the familiar sounds of Gran Combo and the people talking loudly, but there is the history, the visuals that it creates when you read your work. And someone spoke about the pain, and I think that I believe that the way you do that so well is because you're also taking the space of the person observing, and then you could talk about the shock march of the young man that died, and the abuelita, you know, so many beautiful things that you could talk about because you've already gone through it and you're digesting it and just putting it out there so we could see it. So there's a lot of visual in your poetry as much as there is sound. It's very rich, and that's it's an enjoyment reading it, even though I've read most of it as an outsider because I never lived in New York City. So like, you know, I think I told you in the Crazy Bunch and the Shorty Bonbon, there were so many things that I wanted to explain this to me because I couldn't get all of that, but you do. So that's the art. That's the beauty of Perdomo's work for me.
Thank you. Yeah, I think the inhabiting that historical space, I think that's dead on. I think you're right about that, right? That role of history and the documentary poetics, which I think are a big part of my poetics as well. So just I'm glad that sort of was resonant for you. And that's one of my favorite images too, by the way, in the book, where, you know, one of my friends, they're trying to dance, but they're off a step or two, and Abuelita steps in and just kind of spins them back around into his life, you know. And there's a generational thing going on there as well, right? There's that conversation that has no words, but it's all in the movement and the action, you know.
And I think well, I'm not gonna say that, but we're very rarely you see in events, social events, all that the grandparents, the parents, the young people, it just doesn't happen. You know, there's so many cultures that you just separate it. This is for the old people, this is for the young. But in every gathering that I remember, there were always the grandparents, sometimes even the great grandparents that were wielding or whatever. So there's so much that goes on, and it's multi-generational.
Yeah,
and
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, and you know, you bring that is an element. The family is always present. The mother, the grandmother, they're always present. The young girl, and I love the image of, you know, the tough young guy that's in love and cries.
Yeah.
You know, and it's in the savviness, the quick lines. It's beautiful. It's music.
Thank you. So, thank you.
I thank you.
Any more comments, questions? Well, if there are none, I want to thank Willie for giving us a really wonderful pre-Super Bowl afternoon.
Yeah. Enjoy the game. Enjoy the game.
And I'm going to turn it back over to Joy. Before I do, I need to thank our sponsors. We like to thank the 440 Gallery in Brooklyn, the Garner Glazer Foundation, the Park Slope Civic Council, Poets and Writers, the Fife Diggy Dog Foundation, our individual donors, and you, our audience, for making these readings and events possible. Joy?
Just to say, this has been so wonderful, and we've been doing this since 2015. That's the disadvantage of Zoom, and we've got the advantage of Zoom is that people can come in from far away. But we've been doing this from 2015, and I always say it's world-class artistry in an intimate setting, and this today was absolutely upholding that. We're so grateful to you. all for coming, and we're grateful to you, Willie, for reading. This has really been a lovely afternoon. So thank you
Thank
all
you.
so much.
Thank you for having me. Bye-bye.
And and next month, do we
And next month, we're gonna have Christina Oliveras, a wonderful writer that I have written with over the years, and she really is wonderful. So please join us on Sunday, March 13th.